Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Osterhout, the executive producer here at Lincoln Square, and I'm joined by the amazing Andra Watkins. Andra, how are you?
I'm amazing today. That's
Amazing.
great.
Incredible. Fantabulous. This, as you know, everyone who watches the show, this is Unholy Ground, the show that could be called Sam and the White Christian Nationalist Translator, the Rosetta Stone of satanic, I don't know. I'm going out on a limb here. How are you? How's everything going?
I'm really good. I can tell a little personal story.
Yes.
I don't usually do that, but I did try to get a new license in a different country this week and ran into, the usual crazy stuff that I run into seems to every time. So I had to have a right blood pressure reading. And I'm one of those people who immediately has sky high blood pressure when I have to go to the doctor.
Oh boy.
So it has been a fun week for me of taking my blood pressure and realizing that I don't have high blood pressure. And I don't know how that's possible given the work that I do, but I don't have it. So now I have to go and put that paperwork in. So anyway, that's a little glimpse behind the curtain.
Oh my God. Talk about high pressure. Well, doesn't just the act of taking your blood pressure raise your blood pressure sometimes?
Yeah, but in a medical setting, for me, it's called a white coat reading, where you just are so stressed out by this medical setting. And I always have that, but I hadn't documented it. So now I'm documenting it every day. But it's because my blood pressure is scarily normal in normal times, despite the work that I do that should be causing me to stroke out.
Yeah, right. So, my wife, anytime that I'm not stressed out about something she's stressed out about, she says, "Are you dead inside? What is that? What is your problem?" So that's my life. Well, today, look, this is a show about translating the white Christian nationalist language into easily understandable concepts that we can all kind of get our heads around, because it's never been more important right now, because the government has been taken over by white Christian nationalists. And today we're going to talk about a phrase that sounds, as a normie, mainstream Christian, not really anymore, but having grown up in that way, the word and the phrase Kingston, it's my town, kingdom citizenship, sounds like a kind of Bible study, like a phrase you'd see on a poster in Florida outside of a megachurch or something, right?
And you probably do, actually.
I'm sure you do. But you've written about it this week, and it seems to be really among the most politically radical projects in America. And so I want to connect it today, the work you've done this week, to kingdom citizenship, the U.S. cabinet secretary, the 10 commandments in your kids' classroom, and then finally to a Silicon Valley billionaire who gives private lectures about the Antichrist. And the idea that we want to wrap up here is that you're not really a citizen of the United States. You're a citizen of a kingdom. And that kingdom intends to rule. And its foot soldiers are being trained right now in church basements to take over school boards and city councils and state houses. And they already have. And they're in our government, and they're in Washington. And you've said that this leads to a future where there are no borders, which is something we've talked about last week or the week before, and total surveillance. And you said something that sort of just chilled me. Whoever owns the surveillance infrastructure will be the one true God. Mm-hmm. So I want to connect the dots. Okay. Let's start with kingdom citizenship. The city elders preaches about it. Patriot Academy calls it biblical citizenship, but they're the same thing, right?
Well, they are two different branches of the same thing, and there are some differences, which is why I covered both of them. So we'll do that briefly. Kingdom citizenship came up last week in our discussion. So I decided to write about it since we got so much chatter about it on Sunday in the chat. I wrote about it on Monday of this week on my Substack. Biblical citizenship, let's go there first because it's radical, but it can also be benign. I grew up in a church that taught that I was a biblical citizen. And that meant that I was a citizen of the United States on this earth because that's where I was born and the country I was born in. But as a Christian, I was also a citizen of heaven. I had heavenly citizenship. And so it's dual citizenship, which, on earth can also happen. But, the heavenly citizenship, because it's eternal, superseded the earthly citizenship. So the heavenly citizenship was the more important of the two. And there are certainly churches, there will be people in the chat today whose church teaches something like that. But it's not in any nefarious thing, that they're doing that. It's just, this is how we read the Bible, and this is how you have to look at how you conduct yourself as a human being in relation to society between you and God. They don't advocate necessarily all the time for throwing over the government, taking over the Constitution, making everybody follow Christian nationalist directives.
Right.
Some people who teach biblical citizenship are merely trying to show that, you have a heavenly citizenship because you're going to die and go there if that's what you believe. But you have this earthly citizenship. So it doesn't have to be insane on its face, but I mention it because sometimes it is, and therefore sometimes they really do mean kingdom citizenship. And so I wanted to make that distinction as people are looking around their communities. If someone's using the phrase biblical citizenship, they could mean kingdom citizenship.
And it in some ways, like, it makes me feel like, hey, I'm a citizen of the universe, if you, believe in any kind of higher power or something bigger than yourself. Yeah, it sounds sort of, soothing and coping and poetic and in some kind of way. If you use it as, citizen of the universe, it doesn't mean I want to imprison everyone in the universe and own them, right? But this is kind of the next step. And I wanted to, before we kind of get into, connect the dots through this, we talk a lot about people like Jesse Leon Rogers and city elders and all these organizations. And it occurs to me that ever since we've been doing the show, you say city elders and I'm like, but I don't know what the hell it really is. Can you talk us through what city elders and organizations like it are?
And in my Substack, I've shared a link to a piece by the Reverend Dr. Shannon Fleck, who's the executive director of Faithful America. So she's from Oklahoma. She understands this group better than just about anybody. So you can go read her piece for a deep, deep dive if that's your thing.
Yeah, we'll link to that in the post after this.
Yeah, but City Elders is a group that was founded by Jesse Leon Rogers. Initially, he tried to found a church, and it failed. It was all corrupt. He was doing corrupt things. But a thing that I think a lot of Americans don't realize about how our nonprofit structure, it works in the United States, is if you can get your nonprofit designated as a church, then there's no oversight, there's no inspection, everything is opaque. And so he kept that church designation that he started, even though the church failed due to his own corrupt, possibly, practices. And he turned around and founded this city elders group using that extant church designation for it. So even though it's a very political organization that teaches kingdom citizenship, it's still designated as a church and has all the benefits of the tax-free status and nobody looking at anything, and the money goes in there and just disappears into a black hole and nobody ever knows what happens to it, because that's how churches are overseen. So having, for anybody, having your business be designated as a church is a dream,
right,
in
right,
American
right.
society. So that's how he's operated city elders, and city elders has this view of kingdom citizenship, which also some of the biblical citizenship people, they say biblical citizenship, but they really mean kingdom citizenship. So that's why I wanted to make that distinction and make all the listeners aware that both of those things can mean what I'm getting ready to say. Kingdom citizenship always, biblical citizenship sometimes. Kingdom citizenship means you are first and foremost a member of the kingdom of God. And everyone on the planet is a member of that kingdom, whether they believe or not, and we are required as kingdom citizens to honor and obey the laws and rules of the kingdom above all.
Right.
So anytime a man-made authority comes along and proposes a law or a set of regulations that conflict with the white Christian nationalist interpretation of what that law should be, abortion is the best example of this. White Christian nationalists believe all abortion is murder. To me, that's your religious belief. But they've been very clever in how they've corrupted that over the years to mean that they get to force their interpretation of the Bible, that they believe abortion is murder, on all of society, because they will not stop until man's law equals God's law. In kingdom citizenship, the rule of law is the Bible, and specifically their interpretation of the Bible. So when someone talks about being a kingdom citizen, they're applying that not just to members of city elders, but to everyone. It's part of the dominionist mentality that they operate under. And I think we're going to talk a bit about dominionism next. So,
well, and the kingdom stuff, I think if you boil it down to an actual literal kingdom, right? You can be a serf in the kingdom and really not give a shit about the king, but you are still bound to be loyal to that king, right? The laws that you did not create, that you had no input in, you are bound by. And I think that's the calling it a kingdom sounds grand and wonderful, right? But it's not. It's terrible. Like, it's actually, when you think of it in those terms, a kingdom is not democracy. It is not a system in which you are free. And so, I just want to dip a little bit into Patriot Academy and Rick Green and David Barton and those guys, because I don't know a ton about them, but I do know that look, in city elders, you have a church system, you have a network of people. I know Markwayne Mullin, who we'll talk about, is associated with them. He's an incredible thinker and, and leader. I'm kidding. And but Patriot Academy claims that they're training, some tens of thousands of people to become Constitution coaches and teaching the Constitution as actually a Christian document. And so if you accept that they're building a kingdom and that a kingdom is not a democracy, then turning the Constitution into a Christian document is essentially erasing our democracy.
Yes, and I specifically mentioned biblical citizenship because of Patriot Academy.
Yes.
That's the term they use for this notion of kingdom citizenship. So they're an example of a group that is using it in a very radicalized and extremist way. And so you have to be aware of that language when you're out in the world looking for these people. Their application of biblical citizenship is not benign. It is very radicalized. And so they do trainings all over the country. I mean, they've brought in Kirk Cameron and Kevin Sorbo. They've done movies.
Heavy hitters, really.
Yeah. And so they bring people in to learn how to be biblical citizens and and so they teach. It's a very Christian nationalist worldview. The United States was founded as a white Christian nation. You know, you and I talk about this all the time here, but it bears repeating. And they believe that it was founded as a white Christian nation, primarily for the benefit of white men. And they believe that all the founders were Christians and that they meant for the Constitution to be steeped in the Christian nationalist interpretation of the Bible. So, for example, separation of church and state does not exist to protect the state from the church, and having religious laws and having a wall between what someone's faith is and how we are governed secularly. That's not what they teach the founders meant. They teach that the founders were all Christians, and they meant for the Bible to be the basis of our laws, our rule of law, and our Constitution. And then they teach people how to read our laws through that lens. So that's essentially what Patriot Academy is doing. It's an indoctrination program for white Christian nationalism to teach you how to view our Constitution and rule of law through that lens.
So, you know, Markwayne runs ICE now, and you've written about the effort to turn citizenship into a spiritual loyalty test. What does that look like for ICE and for, a DHS, Department of Homeland Security? They're the ones with the guns, right? What does that look like when DHS is now sprung out of places like the Patriot Academy, or Markwayne's I always literally City of Elders. It leaves my brain the second I say it. It's like I feel like I've been vaccinated against it or something. But what does that look like? Look, those organizations we've just laid out really want to do terrible things, and now they have somebody who's willing to impose that on us. What happens practically?
We've talked about this before, but for new people, it bears repeating. White Christian nationalists believe the only people who are full citizens are white Christian nationalist card-carrying men, white men. Those are the people who really have the full benefits of citizenship, and everyone else is secondary. It's a case system or caste system. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. A class system of putting them, the white Christian nationalist men, at the top of the pyramid, and everybody else falls in line underneath that. And so, for example, if you're a Black person, you may adopt every bit of the white Christian nationalist batshittery that you want to, and live that and breathe that every day of your life, but you will never get to the top of the pyramid because you're not white. So it is a system of organizing society that they've come up. I mean, and it's not new. I mean, this is centuries old. I call it new feudalism sometimes because that's really what it is. They want white Christian men to rule us, and the rest of us will be serfs. And if the white Christian man gives you some privileges, then just be so grateful you have them. That's really, and they use their interpretation of the Bible to reframe the Constitution that way and say, you really don't have the right to free speech if you're criticizing me as a Christian nationalist. You really don't have the right to free expression if you're protesting this interpretation of the Bible vis-a-vis immigration that we are forcing on the country. You really don't have that privilege because it violates my interpretation of the Bible. So therefore, the Constitution really doesn't give you the right to protest. That's how they twist this around. And they can sit in meetings and say that they're following the Constitution because they really mean they're following their interpretation of it. But nobody ever pushes back on that.
Well, no, never. I mean, we do, but we're just podcasters, right? But I wonder about this, and I think we've talked about this a lot. I mean, it is called white Christian nationalism, but I'm wondering if to some degree and I want to be careful here, but if the Christianity is almost secondary, I think that's the wrong way to say it, but secondary to the racism, because it does feel like the Bible, their biblical context, their constitutional understanding and interpretation is really the end product is lifting up whiteness, even almost less so than Christian ideals, because their Christian ideals are about whiteness. Is race a sort of base layer of this whole movement?
When I first started talking about this, people would ask me very often on my Substack, how can these people call themselves Christians and be so racist? But yes, racism is the founding dogma of the Southern Baptist Convention. For instance, the whole reason the Southern Baptist Convention exists is because it split off from the North, because they wanted the right to own people and believed that was okay. So the racism and white supremacy is deeply embedded in this concept of white Christian nationalism. Many of these churches still teach the curse of Ham's son from the pulpit, which was a perversion of the story of Noah that taught that peoples of color were cursed by God. And that is how pastors in the lead up to the Civil War justified owning people. So, and people all across the South in churches, I mean, my pastor taught that from the pulpit as a child. So just because the Civil War happened doesn't mean that went away. So the white supremacy and racism is central to who they are. And they take issue with that because, again, they use the Bible to justify this racism. So there's nothing wrong with this racism. It's godly, it's biblical, it's holy. How dare you question it? How dare you make it something bad? You terrible, awful, heathen person. And so, and we saw that yesterday. Markwayne Mullin, and I don't know if somebody can find this clip where he's talking to Al Green, but Markwayne Mullin was pushing back against Al Green, essentially calling out his racism in that hearing. And you can see just how furious he becomes at having that be called out, because he believes that is a fundamental part of the Bible. It is biblical, it is holy, it is part of kingdom citizenship, it is the only truth. And how dare you question it? So that's how they've managed to get all this racism to be mainstream again. This is the way God planned it to be. This is the way God means for it to be. This is God's holy design. And you can't question that. And how dare you call me something bad for believing these things?
It does. All of this is just grasp at a justification for their shit ideas, right? Yes. And their fear and their anxiety about the world and their insecurities about their marriage. And I mean, I imagine, we talk about marriage a lot on this show because they use the Bible to justify really bad behavior in marriage as well. How afraid must you be of your wife, right? Or of being left, or of not being good enough, or of all of these things to have to say, well, it's not me who's beating you, it's God, right? It's not me who's forcing you to stay home. It's God. I mean, I want you in the community. I think that would be great, but God told me you have to stay home and cook me dinner and do everything that I want you to do for me. It's not me, it's God.
I think it's really important for more Americans and absolutely listeners here to process that. These men are some of the most weak, pathetic, insecure human beings alive. And every time they put their beardy faces in front of microphones and cameras, they are displaying just how weak and pathetic they are. All of them have beards. I don't know what that's about, but most of them do. And that's not an aspersion on yours.
I mean,
but
actually, this beard is because my wife, when we met, she said, grow a beard. And I did, and I've never shaved it. So this is actually an inversion of the white Christian nationalist paradigm.
But, it's unfortunate that so many of these men sport that kind of look. It's like that lumberjack look. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So anyway, they have that mentality and they're just man babies. I mean, I wish we could just start calling them man babies everywhere. They think they're projecting this strength and this, you have to respect and fear me but they're pathetic. It's pathetic. They're man babies. And we should just all start calling them that.
Yeah, it is. It's totally weak. It's just weak. And I think when you debate them on the sort of merits of their particular argument or the odds and ends of the Bible or the this or the that, or you go back, you're losing. Mm-hmm. You just say, that's weak, man. That is the weakest thing I've ever heard. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
You're so pathetic. How pathetic are you? You're such a baby, man. I mean, that's what I would say.
Baby man. Maybe that'll be the title of our episode today. The baby man in charge. Markwayne baby man. So look, I think we need to make a leap here to something that is a little less funny and another big baby. So we come from the church basement. We come from, a training ground for citizen Christians and all of this. And we work our way up into the government, to DHS, and all throughout the government. It's riddled with white Christian nationalists, but we also have, Silicon Valley now building this sort of surveillance state. We have Peter Thiel,
Speaking of baby men.
Well, I was getting there. Yeah. So connect all of these dots for us.
It was really interesting to me when Peter Thiel came out several months ago and did this whole series on the Antichrist, which if the Antichrist exists, it has to be him. I mean, I don't believe in the Antichrist, but he just is so evil and disgusting and revolting and a man baby. But anyway, he did this whole series on the Antichrist. And I don't think Peter Thiel believes in the Antichrist. Peter Thiel believes in Peter Thiel.
Yes.
And his own power. And that's all he believes in. He wants to crack the code to be immortal, and that's all he cares about. So, but this series was useful because we've talked before about how many millions of Americans believe we're living in the last days of the earth and that there is an Antichrist character that will come and there'll be all these wars and this horrible war and Armageddon at the end that will end it all. And Jesus will come back and we'll live in glory for 1,000 years on the earth and whatever. Well, you and I won't, Sam, but Christian nationalists will. And so... that's what they believe. And it's one of the pieces of indoctrination that they've done that's so powerful. You talk to people who believe that and you're just sitting there like, how did this happen to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it is a very strong piece of indoctrination. And Peter Thiel understands that. And so I believe this series of discussions about the Antichrist were done to activate those people's radicalization further, because he understands that a man like him, rich, powerful, validating essentially their beliefs that strongly would be like crack cocaine for these people in terms of their extremism and their clinging to that need to believe that that's really what's going to happen, their need for certainty about that. So it was very clever on his part, but again, I believe he only believes in himself. And so to that end, he owns Palantir, which we've talked about here before, which is nothing but a surveillance company to surveil. I mean, one of my colleagues, Mark Ram on Substack, wrote about Pope Leo's take on AI. And he said that these billionaires want to colonize our consciousness. That's really what data centers are about. That's really what Peter Thiel and Palantir and Alex Karp, Mark Zuckerberg, all of them want to colonize our consciousness. That is the next frontier for them that they don't own. And so interfacing with AI, interfacing with algorithms, you know, the more you give your brain over to that, you're ceding acreage in your brain to this kind of control. And so that's how I've started talking about Peter Thiel, Palantir, data. I don't call them that. They're surveillance centers. They exist to colonize your consciousness and destroy the acreage in your brain and have billionaires own it forever, or as long as they can. So that is his goal. And it's about him. It's about his power and money and his search to not die.
So on that happy note, first of all, everyone, if all of this sounds crazy, go back and read Andra's work from this week. Subscribe to For Such a Time as This. Get the updates, get the alerts, get the notifications, do the things, because all of this is outlined here, and she provides links and receipts and everything. But I want to end with what we usually end with. What everyone out there, it's a Sunday morning. What do they do when they wake up on Monday? What's the first thing they do?
One of the things that I talked about yesterday, which was Wednesday on my Substack, if you go look for it, because we're recording on Thursday, is I talked about how Markwayne Mullin is really incredibly weak in this position. Mm-hmm. Because while Kristi Noem was abominable, she was awful. You know, her sex blow-up doll cowgirl cosplay was just awful. She was corrupt. She did horrible things to people. Her husband, I mean, we could go on and on reliving the horrors of Kristi Noem. And she paid lip service to Christian nationalism. She allowed Bible verses to be posted on the DHS Twitter account. She oversaw the making of recruitment videos that we've covered in this space that were Christian nationalist. But her ambition politically was more important to her.
Yes.
Than Christian nationalism was. Markwayne Mullin's ambition is white Christian nationalism. That is why he exists. So his zealotry is his weakness. And we're not going to attack that, in my view, by calling our representatives and demanding that they do something about him. We need to attack what will really make a difference. And so I've recommended that people call the airlines. And because all they care about is money and profit. And if they suffer enough, they will put pressure on the regime, and Markwayne will not be able to do his gatekeeping, his city eldersing, his kingdom citizen thing the way he wants to, because, the president won't allow that if there's enough pressure put on him from these airlines. So I would call an airline if I had an international trip coming up and say, I'm really, really concerned about this international trip because of all this insanity that's coming out of the government. And how are you going to assure me that I'm not going to get hung up in some horrible situation? And I'm not saying cancel your ticket, but, canceling your ticket and demanding a refund would send a message to the airline that this is a problem for them. And that's what we need to get across to them. I would call them, even if I never fly, and say, I'm really concerned because I'm thinking about doing this domestic trip, and international and domestic travel are so intertwined. They can't be separated. So I'd really love to book this ticket right now, but I'm going to drive or fly or plane or train because I don't, you know, this is so insane. You can't assure me that I'm going to be able to get to my destination. And I'm so concerned about that I'm just going to withhold my money from the airlines until you do something.
Yep.
And so I'd even call the airline and say, I've been saving for 5 years to go to Europe, even if I haven't. And I'm going to, you know, I was going to book this trip now, but I'm so horrified about all this discussion and you're not doing anything. So I'm just going to keep my money and not do my trip right now because you're not doing enough to ensure, airlines, that I can get to where I need to go. Goodbye. And I would hang up. And so those are the things. And I've had readers already tell me that they've started doing that kind of stuff. And so the more of that happens, the more the airlines are going to get the message that they've got to do something about him. And I think that's the lever that we have to push on.
Look, I think it's message everywhere. Tell everyone you can. And Andra, you're an incredible model for this because you say that you're afraid people think you're a crazy woman screaming from the rooftop, but you're a truth teller and you will tell anyone or everyone who will listen and most people who won't. And that's what all of us need to do. And so I would say if everyone in the audience, if you call the airline, tell us about it in the comments after we post this. I would really love to hear your take, your story, and even what else you're doing to stop this. Andra, this is always such a pleasure. Thank you. And thank everyone out there for watching. Subscribe, do the things, share this. We're going to make this available. Maybe not this episode, but probably this episode. At some point, you'll be able to get this on Apple and Spotify as a podcast. So keep your eyes open for that. And everyone, have a great week.
Bye.